Okay, let's seriously finish strong this time. So how are we going to help out with the human population? What are we going to do to solve some problems? Section 4 here. So first of all, it's important to understand how the demographics change based on economics, birth and death rate over time. And so there's a series of categories of demographic transition that occurs within populations as countries move through different economic levels. And so the first one's called the pre-industrial. So during pre-industrial stage, there's a tendency to have really high infant mortality. So there's not a lot of good health care and things like that. And so you get low population growth when you're in pre-industrial stage. From pre-industrial, countries usually evolve or become what they call transitional. They become part of a transitional stage where they're in kind of the industrial revolution, if you will. So industry begins, death rates drop, birth rates still are pretty high, and as a result, this is where we have huge population growths, is during this stage. Once countries get through that, they actually go into the industrial stage. In this case, once they're in the industrial stage, more education, more people in the workforce, now the birth rates actually fall off. And they get closer in amount to the death rates. And so what we get here is a slowing of the population growth. Still growing, but a slowing of it. And then we move to the post-industrial stage. And when we're in the post-industrial stage, we have birth rates declining rapidly. And they go down even further to equal to or less than the death rate. And when you get that, you get zero growth or even shrinking populations. And so these are the stages of country development. And so this is what this diagram shows. It lays it out for us a little bit. And so this is your total population and how it's growing, stabilizes, and then actually shrinks as it moves through the stages. So in stage 1, pretty static. Remember, there's a little growth, but not a lot of growth because there's a high infant mortality rate in this section. Then you move in the transitional section. This is where we get rapid population growth because we've slowed down the death rates, but we've kept the birth rates high due to a lack of education and empowerment of women and not as many people in the workforce. And then through the industrial stage, what we do is we start to slow those birth rates down. And when we do that, we start to slow the growth rate down. Still growing, but not as high and fast as possible because we have a lot of good things happening. And then you get to the post-industrial stage where the birth rates actually shrink significantly to match the death rates or go even below them. That's when populations shrink over time. And those are illustrated in both the red and the blue lines as well. So knowing all 4 of those stages is important. You should do that. You should get those bad boys down. So what's the best way for us to slow population growths? It's a combination of things. Investing in family planning. Now, how many children you want to have, manage that process matters. Reducing poverty. When people live in a state of poverty, they have more children. They do that to help out in work or in case some die. And so they need to have larger families with more poverty. And so moving people in the middle class will help the population rate. And then probably more importantly than anything is elevating the status of women. Providing them education, providing them opportunities to work and hold jobs and have financial support, and they can't even own their own land in most places in the world. And when we do that, when we empower women, they have less children typically. All of those will help out with population growth significantly. If you look at population growth, here are the 2 main countries that get talked about a lot. China and India. They're huge. 1.32, 1.136 billion people. 20% of the whole population of the globe. 1 out of 5 people is Chinese. Working on 1 out of every 5 being Indian. Since the 1970s, China has been doing all kinds of things to help curve its birth rate, and actually has curved its birth rate quite a bit. It has the one-child rule. There's lots of nuances with that and how it's been applied over the years. A lot of people tricking the system and doing things. But overall, whether it be good or bad, I don't know, but it has helped to decrease the rate of growth in China since the 1970s. For 5 decades, India has been trying to control its population, and it has had far less success for a variety of reasons. And so let's take a look at those. So first of all, China. Currently, its TFR is pretty low. Remember, total fertility, 1.6 per woman, far less than it used to be. In addition, 300 million people have been moved out of poverty. Remember, that's a huge, important component. Providing family planning, moving people out of poverty, helps to solve the problems. That one-child policy, a lot of people don't like it. It's controversial. It's got all kinds of problems with it that really is potentially troublesome, and they're working on improving those. The natural culture in China says that people prefer to have males to pass on their lineage to over females, and there's a gender imbalance being created in China as a result. The average age of the population as a whole is now increasing, and they're going to have more and more people being older and older, and how are they going to manage that economically? And then, of course, there's not enough resources to support their population, and so China is starting to buy up resources from all over the world to solve the problem. India. It is growing and is going to pass China here in the near future. And why? It hasn't done a good job of planning out what it wants to do. There's been a lot of bureaucratic nonsense involved that has slowed down the process of creating programs. Women have not very high status in India, unfortunately. There's a lot of extreme poverty, especially in northern India. There's a lack of financial support for this particular endeavor. And then there's lots of people who just simply don't agree on the best way to go about it. And all of these things have created kind of a stagnant environment that has not allowed India to manage its population nearly as well as it should. That's the end of chapter 6. Stay tuned. We'll move on to the next ones.